Hello, everyone. My name is Darrell Grant. I am 37 years old. I am currently a student at NJCU, a senior here at NJCU, and welcome to my podcast. The name of the podcast is called Permission Granted, and the name was created by one of my very best friends, who hopefully you guys will meet eventually. Her name is Jessica. We were sitting in her car, after it was, I was given this podcast and we were trying to come up with names. And I was told that I should use my last name somewhere in the title. And she came up with Permission Granted. And I guess the tagline would be, this is the place where, you have the permission granted to discuss whatever is on your mind, openly and without judgment. So, as an introduction to the podcast and an introduction to myself, I think it's only fair that I speak about how I got here and what I want to accomplish through the podcast. So I grew up in Jersey City, born and raised. I live in Bloomfield now. But born and raised in Jersey City, I went to PS14, I went to Dickinson High School, and I was actually in an upward-bound, college-bound program here at NJCU when it was known as Jersey City State College. We were actually part of the name-changing ceremony in Hepburn Hall back in 2000, I believe. So I remember this campus when it looked really different. In fact, the building that we're in right now, G-Sub, looked completely different a few decades ago. But yeah, I was a star student. I was on track to be, quote unquote, very successful adult. But, I made some bad decisions. Dropped out of high school. I, hanging out with the wrong people. There was drinking, there was drugs, there was just a lot of bad decisions. Anyway, I started school. We're going to fast forward a bit. I started college in 2013, Hudson County Community College, and I went for a year and I stopped going. And I found my way back to college, Hudson County, in 2020. I was working at a dermatology practice, and there was an esthetician who went to school after work every day. And I sat there thinking to myself, all I do when I go home or when I leave work is just go home. And something hit me and it, told me, go back to school, do something with your time. So I went back to NJCU. I had to pay them over $1,000 because for the spring 2014 semester, I got financial aid but never showed up. So there's a lesson there that you will have to pay that money back. So I got my associates at Hudson County, and then I started in JCU spring 2022. I am now a senior in my final year, and I think my greatest decision, or one of the greatest decisions I've ever made, was going back to school. So I am part of the OSP program here, and what's funny is the OSP program is located where the offices of the College and Upward Bound program used to be when I was a part of it. But yeah, I got an email, like all of the other OSP students did, detailing this whole podcast opportunity. And what's funny is, I think here and there we may touch upon God, but I definitely believe in God, and I believe he works in mysterious ways, as a lot of people do. And I have been speaking about having a podcast for years with, my close friends, my circle. So when this opportunity came, it was definitely something I jumped at. So with this podcast, Permission Granted, I just want to talk about life and struggles and opportunity, resiliency, falling and getting back up, and, the process of learning to love yourself and allowing yourself to be loved. So in my introduction to who I was, I skipped over a lot of things. One of the things that I want to do with this podcast is definitely connect with people, because one of the many things I've learned through therapy a lot of therapy is that your story is never just your story. There's always someone who identifies with what you've been through. So let's go back to Hudson County. And when I was in Hudson County, you get refunds if you get enough aid that pays for classes, and then there's money left over. So I got a refund from school, and I disappeared. And when I got back home, my mother said to me, "You have a problem." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You have a problem." What she was talking about was a drug problem. And she said to me, you don't have to get help now, but you need to say that you have a problem. And in hindsight, I got it, that the first step is really admitting you're having a problem, because once you admit you have a problem, if you continue to do what you're doing, you're going to know that you're messing up because you've now admitted that you had a problem. So, yeah, I want to go back and talk about how I grew up and where I grew up. So I grew up here in Jersey City, in, I guess, the Greenville area. And anyone that's from Jersey City knows it's not the greatest neighborhood. I grew up in a family full of love. I see that now. I didn't for a long time. My mom was a heroin addict. I grew up without a dad. I was raised by my grandmother. My mom was in my life, but she didn't mother me, but she was there physically. If that makes any sense. So as a kid, I was highly intelligent. I knew too much, which caused its own problems. What I lacked as a child was structure. I was allowed to do anything I wanted because I was the smart one. And that's not what children need. Children actually yearn for structure and discipline, and I didn't have any of that. So, again, as the intelligent child who was on track, to go to a great high school and to go to college and do things traditionally, I was part of, again, the Upward Bound, College Bound program, preparing you for, higher education. Something happened in high school where I just got bored. I didn't feel challenged, and I dropped out. And unfortunately, I came from a family that was of the mindset of, if you're not in school, then just get a job, which is not the correct mindset. You need to finish school. You need to go as far in your education as you possibly can. So, of course, without a high school diploma, I worked jobs that I hated. I worked jobs that weren't sustainable. But being as intelligent as I am, and I say that humbly, and being able to sit in an interview and convince you that I have these credentials that are on my resume, I would luck out here and there and find a job where, I could pay bills and get a car and have an apartment like I've done in the past. But I was the problem. So I would lose these jobs, but it was never my fault. So let's get into the nitty gritty. When I didn't start drinking or like using drugs until I was literally 21. I was in Manhattan with some friends, and we were on the pier, and these people were smoking weed, and they offered us some. Now, most of my friends were like, no. There was me and someone else, and we took it, and my friends were like, what are you doing? You do not know them. You do not know what is in this. In that, rather. It was just marijuana, but it hit me immediately. Like, you live alone. I was 21 at the time. It hit me. You live alone. You can buy this. From that day forward, I smoked weed every single day. After work, on weekends, all day. And then gradually I just started picking up other drugs. There was ecstasy, there was cocaine, there was methamphetamine. I've done it all. And my life went to where that stuff can take you. Through that, years go by. I entered Hudson County, did very well, but I was, using drugs. Um, drugs are not going to allow you to better yourself. So, of course, I dropped out of Hudson County. Um, I was still able to work through this, but I was miserable, wasn't happy. So, we're going to fast forward a bit to 2021. June, Memorial Day, 2021, that's the end of May, 2021. I had an epiphany and I realized that I couldn't live the life that I was living anymore. And I called my mother and I told her I was going to rehab. Now, one thing about me, hence me having this podcast, I'm an open book. So my job knew I had an issue. My friends, I was always very open with my friends. And I called my manager and I was like, it has happened again, because when I say again, I've sought recovery in the past and I always relapsed. And I told my manager, I was like, it's happened again and I'm going to get help. Now, luckily for me, I've been in the medical field since 2015, and drug use addiction, that's the word. Let's be real about it. It is recognized, especially in the medical community, as an illness, and it is. And for those of you who question whether or not it is, it is. It was in our employee handbook that, if you tell management that you have an issue, you won't lose your job, but of course you just can't show up to work the next day. You have to go get help. And I did that. And when I said that going back to school was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made in my life, going to rehab is the greatest decision I've ever made in my life. So June 2021, June 1st, 2021, I called the rehab, Recovery Centers of America, in South Amboy, New Jersey. It's a very swanky rehab. I had insurance with my job, thank God. And June 3rd, I was in rehab. And I'm proud of myself because I put myself there, and even if it was a coin appointed, so what? You got the help. But for me, I put myself there, and it was again the greatest decision I've ever made in my life. Since then, I've gotten my degree at Hudson County. Now, June 2021, that summer break, I didn't take any summer classes, so I didn't miss any school. Got out of rehab, went back to work, finished school, graduated from Hudson, and it is now March 2023, and the host of Permission Granted, me, Darrell Grant, has been clean for 1 year, 9 months, and 16 days. So, again, part of this podcast is just me wanting to talk about resiliency and, what you can do when you put your mind to it. And NJCU has always played a part in my life. I remember when I started messing up in school, I would skip school and literally go to the library and surf the internet all day. So I've been on this campus when I wasn't a student, of course, at the college bound and upper bound programs, but even when I was just, what is the word? I forgot the word when you don't go to school. It's flagrancy, something like that. Someone will let me know. But I was on this campus all day, every day, just surfing the internet and stuff, watching these students, and now I'm one of them. So it's like a full circle moment for me. And I when I decided that I wanted my bachelor's, because the goal was just to get an associate's, but then once I'm like, before I got the associate's, I'm like, why don't you just get your bachelor's? And now that I'm in my senior year, like, you know what? I want my master's. And, I already applied and they're deferring the application to spring 2024 because I can't start until then. I'm done with my senior studies fall 2023. But, it's a full circle moment for me because when I decided that I wanted my bachelor's, I only applied to one school and it was NJCU because my degree has to have this school's name on it. Somewhere deep inside of me, through all of the BS and turmoil and hurt and self-sabotage and self-hate, all of that stuff that I put myself through, and the back of my mind was this school. And for me, that goes back to God because, you know, he put me here in the College and Upward Bound program. And I think, I firmly believe that was on purpose because that seed was planted. And, you know, he knew I would stray from his will, you know, but he knew he planted that seed and eventually I would work my way back to this school. So, here I am hosting this podcast. Um, yeah, and I hope that, maybe not through this episode or further episodes, you know, I'll be able to help someone along the way or help someone find some encouragement because you don't have to have abused drugs to identify with, you know, wanting to quit or being hurt or, you know, feeling misunderstood or anything that's not, you know, a positive emotion or, you know, a great experience or something. I'm at a loss for words right now, but I just hope that on permission granted, we can connect with people who need to connect. How about that? Um, so yeah, so that's my story. I'm sure as future episodes happen, you know, I'll touch back on some things and go into depth about other things and, you know, something to come up and, you know, we'll talk about that. Uh, yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to do on this podcast is talk about like I want to give a little foreshadowing on what's to come. So I'm going to have one of my very best friends, her name is Jessica, come and sit with me and discuss some things. She'll tell you her story and, you know, I'll, you know, talk more about myself and we'll relate that to, you know, where we are today. We're going to talk about forgiveness and self-love. I have a question that I ask myself, you know, about education. Is it really important? And we'll talk about that in a future episode. I yeah, but as far as, you know, students who may be listening, um and people who may be listening with them, students or not, I want this podcast to be a reminder that anything is possible. A reminder that you're alive for a reason. A reminder that it's okay to not be okay. And a reminder that everything will be all right. You know, we've all been through things. We've all experienced situations that we wouldn't wish on our worst enemies. And sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you think that this is just what it is. But you have to remember that everything is going to be okay. Like it's never going to rain forever. That's just not how it works. Um yeah. So I also wanted to do a Q&A session on the podcast and I think on this podcast and I think it's something that we're going to do at the end of each podcast or maybe we'll do it in the middle and the beginning as an icebreaker. That sounds like a good idea, but we'll see. We're still figuring this all out, or at least I'm still figuring it out. So let's ask a question now. So I had my friend Jessica, because I have no social media. That's one thing about me. I have zero social media. But I know NJCU has a student feed, and I posted that I was starting this podcast, and I asked fellow students to submit questions. Now, I got a lot of likes to the post, but nobody submitted a question. So I asked Jessica to go to her socials and, you know, relay the message that I was hosting this podcast and ask if, you know, people were willing to submit questions. So she sent me the questions. So it's just 4. I think 4 is a good number to do each show. Sometimes there may be more, sometimes there may be less. Now, my major here at NJCU is psychology. My master's program is going to be school counseling, sorry. I do consider myself an unlicensed therapist. I know a lot of people's business. but it's only fair because a lot of people know mine, again, as the open book that I am. Um, so my questions, my answer to the questions are not those of a professional. I base my knowledge or my answers off of who I am currently and the information that I have, if that makes any sense. Um, so the first question, it says, I recently did 2 semesters in college, but decided to take time off because I didn't feel ready. What is your opinion on taking a few years off of school before fully committing to college? That's a very good question. I know in countries outside of America, it's normal to take some a year or two off. Again, and I'm forget if there's a term for it, but to take a few years off or maybe a year off before you enter college. And some people do it here in America. I think it's completely fine. This is the thing. For most of us, when you are of college age, you're an adult. And adults, typically can do what they want. Now, I think what worries parents anyway is if you take those years off, you're not going to want to go to school. And that's a possibility. But I think that for some who take the year or 2 years or whatever year off, it may make them want to go to college even more. They got what they needed to out of their system, the partying, the doing whatever. And now they're ready to focus on school. So I don't see the problem with it. Again, I think it's the biggest factor is the individual. Again, people are not the same. So you may have one person who takes, a couple of years off and then they keep extending that break. And then there are some who take a year or two off and then they're ready to go to school. It all depends on the individual. The point is your goal. If your goal is to get a degree, you're going to get a degree, period. If you're, and I'll use myself as an example. When I decided that I wanted my degree, I still wasn't living a clean life, so to speak. But I went to school. I did my dirt around my school schedule because the goal was to get my degree. So if you want to get a degree, you're going to get a degree, whether you take 1 year off, whether you take 5 years off, whether you go straight to college after high school. If you want it, you're going to get it. It's not going to be easy. College is not for everyone. College is not easy, but it makes you better. And if you want to be better, and if you want that degree, you're going to get it. Now, let me explain better. You're not better than your brother who didn't go to college. I mean better in the sense that you're better within yourself. I think one of the things that we tend to do is compare ourselves to other people. No, you're in a battle with yourself. If you're doing better than you were last week, you're winning. You're not comparing, are you doing better than your coworker? No. If Darrell is doing better than the Darrell of 2021, then Darrell is winning. And hopefully the Darrell of 2024 is doing better than the Darrell of 2023. But yes, to get back to your question, it's fine to take the year off, to take the 2 years off. Because if your goal is to get the degree, you're going to get the degree. And it's never too late to go back to school, And if you are not a traditional student like I am not, meaning an older student, you will see that you're never the oldest person in class, ever. So, if you want to take the year off, take the year off. Enjoy yourself. Don't do drugs. If you want that degree, put in the work and you'll get it. So, thank you for your question. The next question is, why did they feel the need to make this podcast? Oh, so I need to read this in the correct context. I read it verbatim, that's what it says. But Jessica, again, she posted these questions for me. So the question should have read, I guess, why does he want to do the podcast? I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but I want to do the podcast because my friends are laughing because I'm about to say something that's very true. I love the sound of my voice. I love to hear myself speak. I have a slight obsession with myself. Again, this is permission granted where we have the permission to, the granted permission to speak truthfully and without judgment. And I am quite in love with myself. And it took a long time to get here. Um, but no, that's one of the things. But I also have a lot to say. I am very opinionated. It gets me in trouble sometimes, with friends, family, alike. Um, but I also like to listen, which is why I want to have guests on the show. Um, I think I give good enough advice, and I hope that with time and, my training and then entering the master's program, I'll be able to give even better advice. But the main goal of this podcast is just to connect with people. Telling my story is therapeutic. Each new person that, I tell my truth to frees me, because the more people who know your story, the harder it is for you to hide. You can't say that you're an addict in recovery and then come in not looking, how you normally look, because people are going to be like, okay, what's going on? So it's self-serving in that way. But it keeps me alive. How about that? Um, but yeah, it's to connect with people and, spread some love and to have some laughs. It's just an escape, and it's a dream. So that's the honest truth. I was thinking about it on the way here, outside of worrying if I was going to get here on time, because I hate being late. Because being late is rude. To the people who are waiting for you. But I was thinking about, where is this going to take me, in the future? When I was offered the podcast by Dear Ryan, we were talking about, well, we don't want to talk about too much about that, but like, nothing in life is free. But I wasn't even thinking about that, It's just really something that I want to do. And yeah, this is something I'll never forget. I can say literally after tonight that I've hosted a podcast. But yeah, it's more so about the inspiration and connecting with people and, just living the dream. So yeah, so thank you for that question. The next question, and I thought it was 4. I apologize. There are 3 questions here. The next question is, well, this person wrote, and we're going to read it verbatim. It says, Engineer Junior, how did you juggle work, school, and a social life during college? So what we're going to do, we're going to play Professor and cross out Engineer Junior and put a question mark, because it doesn't make any sense with the rest of the text. And we're going to just read the rest of the question. How did you juggle work, school, and a social life during college? So, well, we would also cross out did and put do in red lettering, because it's not past tense, because we're still in college. So, present tense. How do you juggle work, school, and a social life during college? So, some people are not going to like this answer, but for me, it's quite easy, because I love my job and I love school. I am that student that gets to class before everyone else. And I think it's because I'm older, and you hear stories about professors liking the non-traditional student, because we know what we want and we pay attention and we're not on our phones and all of that. Because listen, I'm 37, I'm not getting any younger. Okay. So if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it right. But how do I juggle schoolwork and a social life? It's not hard for me. I go to work. I try to schedule my classes after work, and I've been very successful with that. And the social life part. With the life that I've lived, I've had a very social life, be it good or bad. As far as my social life now, I have excellent friends. And for the most part, if I'm outside of the house, I'm at a restaurant, because we like to eat. So most of my time is spent home, on campus, at work, or in a restaurant. And that's the honest truth. So it's not hard for me to juggle it. Again, if you want something, you will find space and time for it. Be it something good, like work, school, hanging out with your friends, or be it something bad, and there's a long list of bad things that, you can find time for if you want to find time for those things. So it's not difficult for me to juggle these things. Yeah. So that's the answer to that question. And thank you for that question. So yeah, again, that's all I have for today's podcast. I hope that you know this little bit has made you, the tiniest bit interesting in checking out future episodes. I hope that you found this somewhat entertaining. And I do promise that every episode is not going to be, tragic stories and solemn moments. There's a lot of joy going on here. Yeah, but I want to end with something I heard yesterday. Well, I've heard it, several times throughout my life. Some people may know where it's from, others may not. But the quote is weeping may endure for a night, but joy will come in the morning. So I want to break that down. It says weeping may endure through the night, meaning you may cry. It's not guaranteed that you will cry. It's not guaranteed that you will be sad, but joy will come. So the key words are may and will. So you may experience, distress and hurt and pain, but in life, you will experience joy. So, I guess to go back to why I wanted to do this podcast, to remind people and maybe myself that happiness, joy, and freedom, it's guaranteed. It's promised to us. And, it's up to us to walk in it. So, yeah. So that's all I really have for tonight. I hope that, again, you guys are interested in hearing more that I have to say. And I promise you, there will be laughs. There will be lighthearted moments. And we'll definitely get in depth about some specific topics. I think you guys will see, that I am, that I have some things to say. I apologize if I was all over the place tonight, but this is my first podcast, so, be patient with me. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, and this has been Permission Granted.